Liberal Fox News commentator Jessica Tarlov poured cold water on her four MAGA co-hosts as they tried to celebrate a recent, high-profile, bad poll for President Biden, and it was glorious. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we do have some clips to look at in this video, but before we do, I want to set you up with the proper predicate because this is what they're reacting to. It was a recent poll by New York Times / Siena, okay? It's probably individually the highest profile poll that we look to for politics here in the United States. And quite frankly, it's not good for the president. So this is the headline here. Voters doubt Biden's leadership and favor Trump. Times / Siena poll finds the share of voters who strongly disapprove of President Biden's handling of his job has reached 47%, higher than in Times / Siena polls at any point in his presidency. And we're going to look at some of the crosstabs. But again, not great as far as an individual poll is concerned. Now, again, before we get to the clips, I just want to say this because I know a lot of people in my audience don't like the fact that I look at polls. But every major political strategist, people actually do this professionally, not just are nerds about it like I am, will tell you, you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. But I'm also not freaking out about this because it's one poll. It's not necessarily indicative of the aggregate, right? The aggregate shows Biden within the margin of error with respect to polling with Trump. And we're what? 8 months away from the presidential election? Plenty of time for things to change. But this is what they're reacting to in the clips I'm about to show you. So obviously on the 4 out of the 5 are taking a victory lap. They never acknowledge any polling in the history of civilization that ever favors Biden. But any random poll, not that this is one, but any poll that favors Trump, they're going to make hay over. So then the question becomes, how is Jessica Tarlov, as the lone sane voice on the 5, how is she going to respond? Well, I think I'm going to play 2 clips. I think she just responds beautifully in typical Jessica Tarlov fashion. And in this particular clip, they're talking about how recent polling, including the New York Times poll, indicates that Trump is closing the gap with the President Biden, with respect to younger voters. That is specifically what Tarlov is addressing here.
There were a few things, though, in the polls that stuck out to me as just kind of mind-bending. So in the Dobbs era, the New York Times Siena poll had him tied with women with Trump at 46. So Biden won 57% of women in 2020 before Roe v. Wade was taken away and before we've had 7 or 8 referendums on reproductive choice and before women have become, again, the angriest coalition of voters. And now suddenly they're tied. That makes no sense to me. I know that Donald Trump released gold sneakers and he's been indicted, so he thinks that black people like him more now. But do you really think that he's going to get 20% plus of the black votes? Completely upends electoral history. The Hispanic vote in the New York Times Siena poll, so only 3% of their interviews were done in Spanish, when about 20% of the Latino electorate is only Spanish speaking. So that seems like it's not particularly representative. And then the Gen Z vote, again, this idea that Donald Trump is appealing to a generation that cares about the things that he cares about the least on the planet, like reproductive choice, climate change, gun safety. And then just a Dean Phillips moment. Dean Phillips even tweeted this. He was getting 12% representation in one of the polls. He said, only 5% know who I am, and he gets about a percentage point in all of these caucuses.
So again, Tarlov lays into the serious issues that this poll has, perhaps not with its methodology, although I think it only had a sample size of like 800 or 900, right? But how out of step it seems with electoral history, recent electoral history. You know, it's not like it's decades out of touch, but I mean, like even recent events. We've seen ballot referenda. We've seen special elections in which, like abortion, as she points out, you know, is a turning point issue, and Democrats just clean house. So is it possible that Biden himself is so uniquely polarizing that it changes the calculus? Maybe, or perhaps, again, this is just not simply reflective of the aggregate. So I like the fact that she addresses these things. Then at one point, Greg Gutfeld, who again is just celebrating these things, you know, he's just hanging his hopes on it. And Jesse Waters as well, as a matter of fact. This is what Jessica Tarlov has to say when they predict a Trump blowout.
Something I feel like there should be a Trump blowout. Given all of these numbers, that's why I don't trust it.
Well, I think you should trust it just because Republicans are always so beaten down and demoralized into thinking that you're a minority in this country. And you see a poll like this with these demographics that Jessica just laid out. Women, Hispanics, blacks. People agree with the policies that Donald Trump pushes in the platform. And that should make all Republicans and all Americans happy because they were successful.
Remember your midterms. You nearly cried.
Up next, the former Border Patrol Chief Justice.
Remember the 2022 midterms, you nearly cried. And he did. That's hilarious. And it's true, right? Because, again, they were predicting a red wave. I said this recently during a conversation that I had on another streamer's channel. Part of the reason why I don't get in the prophecy business anymore. I, too, expected a red wave. Not because the polls indicated. Actually, and I made this point in my this recent conversation on this other political streamer's channel. If you actually look at the polling at the time, if you did a post-mortem on it, the polling did not actually reflect that there would be a strong red wave. There was some discrepancy there, but the issue was in the cynical analysis of those interpreting it and those who relied on the expectation, the tradition that the sitting president's party is shellacked in the midterms. That's usually what happens, right? And I'm also a cynic by nature, so when you combine these things, I too was expecting a red wave. Simon Rosenberg and others were, a few were saying, no, the polling isn't there. Even though the history may be, we're not going to see a red wave. And there wasn't. Fox News also predicted a red wave, and they were just dead wrong. So Jessica Tarlov is saying, hey, don't count your chickens before they hatch because you've done this before and it devastated you. But I also love the cope coming from, Gutfeld is at least smart enough to be like, I don't, this seems wildly out of step with, again, recent electoral history, recent polling, et cetera, and so forth. So he's right to hedge his bets there. But Waters is like, well, everybody loves Trump's policies. What policies? And when has Donald Trump or the Republican Party ever campaigned on a policy-rich platform? They haven't. They don't. Trump really doesn't talk about his record except to lie and, to say, I had the lowest unemployment ever. I was such a big special boy. When, in fact, unemployment has been lower under President Biden. So what I'm saying is like he doesn't actually campaign on a policy agenda. So I don't know what Jesse Waters is talking about. But the other thing is, if you actually look at the crosstabs, even in this poll, there's not some great news for Donald Trump. I mean, if you look at it, like people say that 53% of the American people say that Donald Trump has committed serious crimes. Neither of them poll particularly like his net favorable is still very low. It's higher in this poll than the president's, but this idea that Donald Trump is just an overwhelmingly popular figure is just not true. Even in this poll, Trump is not popular. He just, in this poll, is more popular than Biden, right? But MAGA and Fox News will never tell you that. And then the other thing I want to point out, I did make this one post over the weekend, and for the most part is relatively unplugged. But when I saw some things on Twitter that I just felt the need to respond to, I made this thing. I said some notes on Biden, Trump, polls, withholding votes, et cetera, and so forth. Say Biden is better than Trump by far in all ways. Most Americans say Trump is also mentally unfit for office, so let's pounce. And we've done videos about this. We're going to do another one here, probably either tonight or tomorrow about it because there's new polling about it. You shouldn't flippantly ignore reputable polls or nihilistically spiral over them, right? Threatening to withhold support to extract concessions is risky but fair and valid, especially in a primary. And I do believe that. I think it's okay in a primary if people take the risk of saying, listen, we want some concessions out of you. So we're not going to commit to voting for you until you grant concessions. That's democracy. People do that. However, indicating that the most proximate candidate can't earn your vote regardless of what they do or change forfeits your leverage. So if you say, I'm not going to vote for Biden no matter what, and you're more liberal or more progressive or more on the left, that's ridiculous because all that's going to do, if anything, is just going to motivate the president and the Democratic Party to lean right. So don't do that. If you're going to threaten to withhold your vote, you need to signal to the president and the Democratic Party that they can earn it back. And the other thing I mentioned here is that a Trump victory will hurt a lot of people, but Joe Biden won't be one of them. He'll leave office as an octogenarian multimillionaire with state benefits like Secret Service protection and a pension, and will go down in history as the most successful one-term president in modern history. And we got to change the court. So that's one thing I really want to emphasize. There's a lot of people out there saying, I'm really unhappy with Joe Biden and I'm not going to vote for him. This is a way to hurt him. You're not going to hurt Joe Biden. You may sting his pride. You may bum him out because he thinks that Trump would be really bad for the country. But Joe Biden is near the end of his life. Joe Biden is near the end of his career. He's in, this is the final stage, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. And he is wealthy. He is powerful. He is famous. And again, history will look at if President Biden only has one term, they will look at that one term correctly as the most legislatively and executively competent and successful presidency in modern history, if not all of U.S. history, for one term. It's extraordinary. So those are the observations I had to make. Great performance by Jessica Tarlov, per usual. Let me know what you think in the audience.